Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerd Steve, and I'm hanging out with Robert Adducci over here today. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, you said you just got done practicing some Aikido with the kids,
Yeah.
training your monks up.
Yep. We're gonna get shadow monks.
Nice, nice. So, what's going on in your world, man? How you been coping with everything? How you feeling?
Good. As far as coping with everything, yeah, it's been crazy, but I'm actually very thankful that I've kind of, a lot of times in the RPG industry, it's difficult. You don't have necessarily steady income and all that kind of stuff, but I'm working for Ulysses Spila right now, and the income has been steady, and we actually have more work, so there's a lot of work right now, and things are going well on that side for me. And my wife has always done homeschooling for our kids anyways, and so staying home, is obviously a little bit more stressful if you have to stay home all the time, but other than that, things have been running relatively smoothly.
You also do a bunch of social media for different companies, and you've got a podcast
Hmm.
and a website both dedicated to Dark Sun.
Yeah. I do some social media for Fantasy Grounds, and yeah, I have Athos.org, and I have the Bone, Stone, and Obsidian podcast. And Athos.org is, I actually don't own that anymore. I used to, but then I gave it to someone a long time ago, and then but they still, I still pretty much run it because the guy that actually owns it, he just kind of is more into like the back end stuff, and he just likes to keep it alive. So I do all the front end stuff, and he does the back end stuff.
Yeah, hopefully, with this latest UA, we'll actually get an official Dark Sun. It looks like they're trying to move in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, they talked about it a little. There was, each of those subclasses had a mention of Athos. So I like the Psi Knight, although I didn't really care for the name, and I like the Soul Knife. Wasn't really a fan of the Psychic Soul, or the, what is it? Yeah, Psionic Soul, I think it was called.
I completely agree with all those statements. Basically, the Psi Knight. The name needs a little work. We'll see what we finally get. I'm sure they're all kind of working titles anyway. This version of the Soul Knife I thought was better than the last version, and then
Yeah.
yeah, and then the Sorcerer isn't quite as cool as the other two.
Hmm. And then coming from like a pure, this is the argument I always have with Dark Sun and Psionics is not magic. So coming from that paradigm, I'm not a fan of sorcerers. I'm not a fan of psionics just being another kind of spell. And I know, I've had lots of conversation with Dan Dillon about that on Twitter and whatnot. But I really feel like it needs to be separate and needs to be its own class. And yeah, hopefully, Jeremy said that that's not out of the question yet. So hopefully they find something to do that with.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the Mystic is dead, but that's okay. I'd rather
Hmm.
have a Psionicist or a Scion anyway.
Yeah.
But that being said, though, I'm not opposed to, and I think this works really well for Athos, is every class having psionic
Yeah.
subclasses.
I 100% agree with that. Yeah, I'd be down with that.
And it's Athos, so you should probably just start at third level anyway.
Right? For sure.
So it'll be interesting to see what they come out with. I do like the die. I like the die mechanic, and I do like that they're kind of delving into those psionic feats.
Yeah, I thought it was a cool mechanic. I feel like it was a little bit too random. It felt like another wild magic, like a little bit too random for me. But I like the concept. I like, at least in theory, the idea of like that you can suppress your. I mean, I like the theory that you can suppress your verbal and somatic components, but I mean, I don't think there really should be any in psionics too. So that's like, in a
Yeah.
regular kind of like Forgotten Realms, I think that's cool. In Dark Sun, I don't think it should be there in the first place. That was something with third edition that came around. I think that they were trying to limit the power of scions, like not having any obvious tells that they were the scion,
Yeah. Well, that part becomes tricky too because there's a benefit in the game to that, but it's small, right? It's going to be very situational where
Hmm.
as to like who's doing the thing won't matter most of the time, but when it does matter, it'll really matter.
Hmm.
So how do you game balance that and factor it
Right.
in, right?
Hmm.
Because if you build that in mechanically going, well, this is one of the things they get, but then you start playing and you realize it never comes up,
Yeah.
then it's far less useful.
Right. And that's even like spell components. Like most people don't use them and occasionally be like, oh, okay, well, your hands are tied. So now you can't cast the spell or whatever. That occasionally comes up. But I think it's mostly a balance of like actual costs, you know, something that costs 5,000 gold. That is a bigger limitation.
So you're being echoed in the chat too with the fact that it's they think it's too random. But I kind of just looked at it as like, oh, you can automatically do this thing, you know, 4 times a day, right? But if you roll better, if you roll well, you can pretty much keep doing it. So I guess that's why it didn't really bother me. I just, in my brain, it's like, oh, it's a 4 time a day ability.
Yeah.
It would be kind of curious to see what they do with it for a full-on class, though. If they keep the die and make it, you know, make that work. I thought it was interesting too, like the way the die shrinks, and you know, you certain abilities would just automatically shrink it. So
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see where they go with it, but
for sure.
So on your podcast, usually is it an actual play or is it just, you know, talking about Dark Sun?
It's just talking about Dark Sun, and I've actually kind of pod faded here for the past couple of months. My partner has been just super busy. He had a new kid, Wayne Chang. He had a new baby, and so you know, and then with the COVID thing and everything, so we haven't recorded in a while. And I've talked about getting more special guests on. We had Jesse Heinig, who has written a bunch of stuff for Dark Sun, and so we had him on, and it's just basically the two of us, you know, 2 people or 3, just talking about stuff. We've also had like Tim Brown and Troy Denning, you know, the creators on, just kind of talking about different aspects. And there's a lot of a great podcast. And like you guys, I know, did some like, you know, Dark Sun kind of overviews and that kind of thing. And so what we're trying to do is go a little bit deeper dive on each of the topics that we pick. And then we go and we usually start and we just start talking about the topics, but then we also relate it like, well, in 2nd edition, it looked like this, and 3rd edition, it looked like this, and 4th edition, it's like this, and in 5th edition, this is how I do it in my games. And so a lot of people end up like, you know, I have very, I guess, specific ideas of how I want my Dark Sun to look. And so a lot of times people are like, oh, that's not how it was in the past. And it's like, well, I'm not saying this is how I am. I'm not Wizards. This is not how Wizards is doing it. This is how I want to do it, you know?
So you're currently running Dark Sun games.
Yeah. So I have a Patreon, and I run Dark Sun games. I run a bunch of like I run some Waterdeep Dragon Heist games. Well, now we're into Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and then I run a bunch of miscellaneous. I'm running Punk Apocalyptic, Shout of the Demon Lord. I run Wrath and Glory. I want to run Rifts. I just got the new Rifts, so I run all of those. And then the Dark Sun game is an ongoing game. We're into the 2nd campaign. We're doing a like a tier-based campaign. So the city's hit a tier. So we're all into that, and everyone's like 8th or 9th level now. So
do you bother trying to like simulate the harshness of Athos, because in 5e as it is, it would be really tough.
Yeah, so we talked about that in our survival episode, and in this campaign that I'm running right now, I'm not, because it's pretty much just based in tier. Like literally last session was the first time we got out of tier. It's just always been in the city. This is like a city campaign. The previous campaign was pretty much just walking across the desert. Like that's all they were doing. And so in that campaign, yeah, I used it a little more, and I've experimented with how I want to do that, because like you said, it's the rules for it in 5th edition are pretty lax. And so I've just kind of made it a little harsher. Like when you find water with survival, it's not food and water, it's food or water. And you're never finding it for more than, unless you roll like a really high number, you're never finding it for more than yourself.
Yeah, it's like some of the things like would be hard to carry over, in my opinion, just because like it was a setting that basically said your characters are going to die. Like that was kind of like the premise, you know, the character tree. You started with 3 characters because just expect you need a backup.
Yeah. So yeah, I've kind of done a couple little things for 5th edition Dark Sun to make it a little harsher. One is like the slow natural healing thing. So when you heal over, you know, when you only heal with hit dice, you never heal overnight. So when you rest at night, you don't heal at all. So you have to spend your hit dice, and so when you only get half of your hit dice back, if you have a lot of fights, you're gonna get in deficit there pretty quick. And so that's one way to do it. Another way I do it is the whole like, oh, the clerics are often like in 5th edition are like, oh, I'm just gonna wait till you fall down, then I'm gonna bring you back up, right, to save spells. And so I kind of push that a little bit by, if you go to 0, you gain a level of exhaustion. So it makes, it gives you a little bit of the death spiral, although I haven't seen it like negatively affect the game. So I like it.
Now, is that because people just generally now don't go to 0 because they're healing before that happens and they're not waiting like, oh, we have another round to do this? Or
yeah, so it encourages people to heal, because they don't want that level of exhaustion. They definitely don't want the second level of exhaustion.
I know, like I did a game or a session of the Middle Earth game, and like we did okay on the journey part, which means we only had a level of exhaustion when we got to where we're going, and I'm like, this is really bad. Maybe we should rest, guys. And they're like, nah, let's do this. So like we're doing all this stuff, and then you realize how many ability checks you actually make,
right?
And they're all at disadvantage. So, that's a nice mechanic. I think Esper the Bard uses that as well. We've been playing some games with him.
Nice.
If you go down, you get a level of exhaustion. Which, like, if you go down more than once in a fight, that's going to get brutal fast.
Yep, that second level hurts.
And I think it also would mitigate the perception of how powerful people think Healing Word is. Because for me, I'm like, well, it's a D4. It's like you are much better off just using a cure spell than that. The range is nice, and the bonus action is nice.
Yeah.
But it's only really useful if someone drops, in my opinion.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
As far as action economy. So what do you want to talk about, man, today? What do you got? What do you got? What are you working on? So since you're working with some companies.
Yeah, so I'm primarily I've kind of lessened up on my writing a little bit, and I'm doing some editing, which has been nice. So I'm looking to control some writers in the Unlimited, what is it, Ultimate Scroll or Unlimited Scroll? Gosh, I can't remember the name of it. It was a recent Kickstarter, but I'm going to be kind of helping them get some writers to write 5 adventures, one for each of the scrolls, and so I'm going to find some writers for them and kind of produce that for them, and then I've mostly been working on Ulysses Spiela content. So I do social media for them, but I'm also sort of like their communications manager. And then I've kind of now stepped in to do a little bit of editing. So I'm going to be doing some editing work for The Dark Eye, which is a fantasy RPG that's kind of based out of Germany. They brought it over here in 2016, I think, did some Kickstarters, and there's been a couple. And The Dark Eye is kind of like a little more Eurocentric, in that it has like a lot of just a lot of lore that I love. The lore for Dark Eye is amazing. If you have not checked that out, it's kind of like a fantasy RPG, and a lot of the monsters are different. They're not the ones that we sort of expect from D&D and things like that. So I really appreciate the monsters and the lore, and the lore for the gods is amazing in that game. There's 12 gods, and so I've been doing editing for the the starter set, which is going to come out. It's already out in Germany, but then we're translating it and getting it out in English.
I've played a session of Wrath and Glory. We played a campaign of Torg, but I have not checked out Dark Eye yet.
Yeah, and I just ran some Dark Eye on Fantasy Grounds. There's like a free extension for that, so I've ran that. I haven't run Torg yet. And then we just finished up the Fading Suns Kickstarter for the 4th edition of that game.
I'm like mentally stuck when it comes to fantasy RPGs. I just tend to gravitate towards D&D, and then if I'm going to play something else, then I would play another game.
Yeah, The Dark Eye was something that I'd never seen before, and as I get more and more into it, It's pretty interesting. It has some interesting mechanics. Like it's got the roll low mechanic. So if you're rolling for your stats, you know, you're rolling for your attributes you roll, and you want to get equal to or less than your stat. And the way the skills work is really interesting. When you roll a skill, each skill has 3 attributes that are tied to it. And so you take 3d20 and you roll them. And you can do that either in 2 different ways. You can either have like a specific d20 for one of your attributes. And the way they do that is like colorization. So if you have a specific color d20, it goes to a specific color attribute. And then, you know, you have to roll lower than your stats, and you have your skill points that you can sort of spend to make yourself succeed if you slightly fail. Or you can just roll your 3d20 and kind of read left to right, which is what I kind of do. So the leftmost d20 is the first stat, and so on. And that it's like a little bit more complicated on a skill check, but it lets you narrate, like, well, why did you fail? You know, why did you fail, or why did you succeed? Like if you're trying to climb, it doesn't just have to do with your strength. It's also your dexterity, and it's also your toughness or whatever. And so if you fail on one of those, you know why you failed or why you succeeded.
So it's a little more granular.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. Now, yeah, so my understanding of Dark Eye is Europe's version of D&D. Like we play D&D here, they play Dark Eye there.
Yeah. Apparently I learned the backstory on that is apparently like the company that originally owned it, they came to TSR, you know, in the 80s, and were like, hey, we want to translate D&D, and for whatever reason they said no, or negotiations didn't fall out right or whatever. They didn't get it, and so they're like, fine, we'll create our own thing. And so they did.
Yeah.
Dark Eye is like D&D over there in Germany.
Nice. So how many games are you now running over on your Patreon?
So I've just got the 2 sort of permanent games. Those are like monthly games or twice monthly games, the Dark Sun game and the Waterdeep game. And then I run a bunch of just like one shots. I try to run just kind of things that I'm interested in. Like I said, I was running a bunch of Wrath and Glory. I've run some Punk Apocalyptic and Shadow the Demon Lord. And actually since we've kind of gone on quarantine, I've kind of opened those up to be public games. So I give my patrons the opportunity to sign up first, and then I've been uploading them to Warhorn and letting people sign up publicly. So if any of you are interested, and you can go to my Patreon. You can follow me on Patreon. You don't have to pledge. You can just follow me there, and then the posts will become public after like 24 hours, or depending on how long I run them. And then that way you can sign up. And so actually today at like 6 o'clock, one of my posts will go public, and that will list all those games for the next like 3 weeks.
Cool. So in the pinned post, I've got some links. I've linked to your podcast and to your Twitter and to the Athos site. So cool. If you go to Robert's Twitter, you can find his Patreon easy enough.
Yep.
And check that out. That's awesome. Yeah. So do you find you're playing more games now with quarantine? Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I've been the last few weeks I've been kind of running 2 games on Saturday and 1 game on Friday afternoon as well. So I've been running an additional 3 games a week on a regular basis now.
We have a question in the chat. There's actually a couple of them, but this one just jumped out at me. Achille 19. How are the creatures different in that game? And I imagine they're talking about Dark Eye.
How are they different? So a lot of them are sort of more based on like folklore, and they're a little darker. I wish I would have grabbed my bestiary, but the monsters they're just a little bit darker, I feel like. And they just feel like if you watch The Witcher, it kind of has more of that feel if you've seen that movie or that show or played the game. So it's kind of like along those lines of kind of darker fantasy feel.
So like Brothers Grimm fairy tales as opposed to regular fairy tales.
Right. Exactly.
Nice. What kind of stories do you like to tell personally when you're running games?
It kind of varies on the game. In post-apocalyptic games, which there's that like Facebook there was like a Facebook kind of meme thing going around where people are like posting like games they love and games they don't really want to play and like their favorite genre and stuff. And I guess I've never really thought about it. And so while I was doing that, it was like your favorite genre. And I'm like, oh, fantasy. And I'm like, wait, no, not really. Because I've been running a lot of post-apocalyptic stuff. And I'm like, yeah, it's post-apocalyptic. My favorite fantasy is Dark Sun. And that's pretty much post-apocalyptic. Yeah. And so I've been thinking about that a lot. And so when I'm running that kind of game, a post-apocalyptic game, even when I run that style of game, I still like there to be hope. And I still like the characters to be good. So like a lot of people, for example, on Dark Sun, when I'm talking about Dark Sun, they're like, what are you doing for Defilers? And I'm like, I don't really care about Defilers because to me, I don't want my players to play Defilers. Defilers to me are the bad guys. And so I have not made up, I mean, I have a rule set that's just like kind of there, but also I discourage my players from defiling because and I do that more than the rules. I kind of do that as like, it's bad and the people that around you are not going to like it if you do. And like people see consequences of other defilers. And so they're like, oh, I don't really want to do that. And so I'm hoping one of these days though, that somebody does when they really need to. And that's where cool stories come from. So I like it when mechanics help the story along.
Yeah. Wait, so what do you do for defiling? Do you, is it a deficit or is it a perk?
So it's a perk, but also a deficit. So the perk is that the way, and this kind of wraps around back to the psionics talk of the psionic soul, because I use the sorcerer mechanics for defiling. So if you defile, you can do just like if you were a sorcerer and you can, upcast your spell, or, you can use a lot of the meta magic feats to defile, or not meta magic feats, but whatever they're called now, meta magic features to defile. Now, if you do, you turn everything to ash, you hurt your allies, and that you make them go slower during that round of combat, and actually make anybody that's near you, not just your allies. But then the bigger thing, and the reason they sort of went away from this in 4th edition, is the bigger thing is the social ramifications. If somebody sees you defiling, like they're gonna call it out, and like you're gonna be on the run all of a sudden. So
yeah, you quickly become enemy number one.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, 4th edition, I briefly got excited because they tried to launch books to coincide with it,
mm-hmm.
but they were terrible.
Yeah, I was not really a fan of most of the 4th edition novels, the exception being Rob Schwab's Deathmark. That book I thought was good. It wrapped up maybe a little bit quick, but that's sometimes what happens in books. But yeah, the other two were
the one that I read, I don't even remember the name of it. I don't even know if I finished the book.
Yeah.
It was because at that time they released that, and then they also released a Gamma World book, Sooner Dead, which was amazing. It was written by Mel Odom. I was even surprised when I saw his name because he hadn't done any writing for Wizards of the Coast in a long time. I think he only did the one series, Threats from the Sea. And then if you look at his writing credits, they're like CSI and other really well-known TV. I'm like, he must have just did this because he just liked the setting or something.
Yeah, I looked up one of the authors that did the Dark Sun book, Keith Candido, and he apparently wrote a bunch of like stuff like that too, like crime kind of stuff. And that's what he tried to do in Dark Sun, but you could just tell like he had no idea about the setting, and so there were so many things that just irked me about the story.
Yeah. This is a shame because like that, they were some of my favorite novels to read. I haven't read them in like 20 years or more, so I don't know how well they hold up.
Like the Prison Pentad books, is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, I actually just recently re-listened to them on audio, Audible, and they were good. Yeah, I think they hold up great.
Simon Hawke was another great writer for Dark Sun. I think he did Tribal One.
Yeah, I love those books, and a lot of those books people give a lot of crap for because he made some mistakes, not as egregious as the more recent books, but I love them too. Yeah, and then I went back and listened to Rise and Fall of the Dragon King. That's one of my favorite novels by Lynn Abbey for Dark Sun.
Which one is that?
So she did the Chronicles of Athos, which were like 5 books that were not really tied together. Some of them were, and like one of the main characters was Pavik, who was a Templar of Hamanu. which was great because he was just like a lowly person that rose up as to be one of the highest Templars, and it really gave the backstory. Although a lot of it is sort of canonically questionable, but it gave the backstory of Uric and Hamanu, of one of the Sorcerer Kings, and yeah, I love it.
Plain Havoc. I do remember them. They were really good. I think I read like all the Dark Sun books back then, but again, I think I was probably in like high school or middle school.
Yeah.
Feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, that's why I had to read them again because
I'm always afraid to go back to the things that I loved as a child because it's like sometimes it's just really bad.
Yeah, sometimes you got those rose-colored glasses and you're like, wow.
I made my kids watch I tried making my kids watch Thundar the Barbarian.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they were not having it. I don't know that we made it past the intro, and they mutinied.
We started watching Gargoyles, and it's actually my son's into it. He's like, why do they keep showing the same thing at the beginning every time? Because like, you know how they do like the previous episode kind of wrap up. So I was like, well, back then we didn't have a choice to just keep watching the same show over and over. We had to wait till the next week to watch it, and sometimes you would forget what happened.
Yeah. Things were not quite the same. There was no on demand.
Yeah, there's no binge watching.
So Doug wants to know, how do folklore elements of Dark Eye affect mechanics? Is it about fighting monsters and you have to figure out how to beat them?
I will be honest, and I'm still new to the Dark Eye, and so I would say I feel like the adventures written for that, I mean, there are definitely monsters and dragons and all that stuff, but I feel like it's just more it is more role playing than kill the monsters. Not that you can't do that, of course, you can do that as much as you want, but just the way the adventures are written, it just feels like there's more emphasis on social encounters and that kind of thing.
Cool. So you said you haven't run Torg yet,
I have not run Torg yet.
Yeah. Have you delved into that at all?
I've kind of like read through the core book, and then I have a bunch of the other books and some of the adventures, but I haven't gotten there yet. So one of the things I'm doing with everybody staying inside, one of Ulysses' mandates is that we stream a bunch. So we're streaming as much as we can. People are at home, and we're hoping that people can check out some of our games for that. And so what I've been doing is kind of learning how to play all the games, because I just started with them in December or January. And so for example, I played one of the things that the Dark Eye has that's really cool, and it's actually free right now. You can go if you go to ulysses-us.com, which is the website, and there's an article called Stay at Home and Play the Dark Eye. And we give a bunch of ways that you can play at home, either with people or by yourself, because we're giving away the Dark Eye core book, Conspiracy of Mages, and Vampire of Havana, which are all solo play adventures. Those two adventures are solo play adventures. So they're kind of like a choose your own adventure. Mm-hmm. But they come with pre-generated characters, and they're full Dark Eye characters. And so as you play through the game, it teaches you how to play the game. And so that's been really fun. So I did a few streams on those, and then I did a Fading Suns character creation walkthrough, and then the other day, and then on tomorrow I'll do a Fantasy Grounds walkthrough of the Dark Eye, and then I'm gonna do character creation for Torg and the Dark Eye. So I'm kind of trying to teach myself these games while streaming stuff for everybody.
Okay, so Torg's a little bit of a tough stream game. I think it'd be a really fun at the table game. We had fun streaming it. We streamed it on Saver Dice. Mm-hmm. I think
because of the cards, like
the cards. There's tokens. There's a lot of physical things components that go to the game.
Yeah.
So like Daryl had run it for us, and so like we would all have our own decks, and then he had a virtual deck, I think, that he was using to draw the cards from. And then we would have to like physically find them,
yeah,
to kind of match it up. Hey, you can make it work, and I'm sure, like especially now, people are probably working on, making extensions and stuff, so that it is a little bit smoother in virtual tabletops. But I would say that was my only thing. But as a game that you play, in person, I think it would be great, because you have everything out in front of you. You're using the same decks.
Yeah, so we are, we're definitely interested. Ulysses is definitely interested in getting people playing all their games online, and as a result, we're contracting with a company to do that. So we're hoping that we'll have, Fading Suns, The Dark Eye, and Torg on Fantasy Grounds and Roll20, and maybe more, in within 6 months.
Nice. Daryl wants to know. Do you have some tips for running multiple games at the same time, such as keeping your stories straight?
It's so for like when I do Punk Apocalyptic and Shadow the Demon Lord, I'm kind of running those by the book adventures. So for those ones, it's pretty easy because I'm just following the book along. For Waterdeep Dragon Heist, I'm, again, that's also pretty much a by the book adventure. And then a lot of my games are sort of one shots. And so I don't really have to worry about keeping a long game together. Dark Sun is the one exception. And with that, I'm so off the rail. I'm so like I just run whatever. So like, for example, I'll just start throwing out a bunch of hooks, and then if people grab onto them, then that's what we play. If they don't grab onto them, then they fall by the wayside. And then eventually, like a couple of sessions later, I go back and I like gather up all those things that nobody grabbed onto, and then put them in. If I want them to have a through line, then I put them in, and if not, then I just let them fall off. And so it's just a matter of keeping notes, which sometimes I'm bad at and sometimes I'm good at. It kind of depends. So I don't really have I guess I don't really have any good advice on how to keep a bunch of stuff together, because I just sort of, I guess my games are different enough that they're not like blending together. I guess I was running like a bunch of Dark Sun games at once, and I could see how that, how that could be troublesome, in which case I would probably just try to either take more notes myself or maybe encourage one of the players to take some notes. That way you can kind of keep things in your head.
One of the things that I found super helpful, and like this, it doesn't even matter if you're running multiple games or whatever, is at the beginning of every session, my players would take turns recapping the last one when I ran the Scarlet Sisterhood. And that was really good in a lot of ways because it told me what was important to the players.
Yeah.
Or at least that's particular player. So, if and then they would just send me the recap. So then I could use those for notes in order to say, okay, how do I want to steer things? Because apparently this stuff that I didn't even think about and just threw out there, they thought was important. So
right.
Why not make it important?
Yeah. Yep, that would be a good way to do it too. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I guess there's always stuff like that. And like you said, I guess it's harder if you have a bunch of people running through the same stuff. Like, you're not running multiple Dragon Heist games.
Right. No, it's one. I was for a while running two different ones, but that one had the advantage of the first group was like the playtest group, and then the second group that came in, they came after them, and so then it was like, oh, I already know what's gonna happen. Like, I'm really comfortable with it already. So I do like running. For a while on my Patreon, when I was doing D&D Adventures League stuff, and I had my what were called author only adventures, I had like a campaign of like 10 adventures, and so I ran those a lot. But those were also still just one adventure at a time, and so it was never like one group of players running through them at the same time. It was disparate players playing at different times, and so I sort of had my own sort of headcanon on how things were going at any given time. And if at a point someone was like, oh, well, this happened in our game and this would have done this, then I would just sort of weave in a way to make what they said happened in that game have an effect on the current game. So at that time, it was, I was doing that, I guess, but it was, I was just running them so often that it was just sort of an ongoing game in my mind, I guess. And so it really didn't, again, that was, I don't know, it just was, it wasn't as big as a problem as you would think it would be, I guess.
Yeah, I imagine it's if you're running the same thing simultaneously, or even if you're, the other place I guess is if you're doing a lot of homebrew and you're running simultaneous games, because then it's a lot easier. But like if you're doing set adventures, but you're not running them at the same time, it's like once you do one, you can kind of take the lessons learned from it, but you can dump everything else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's not too bad.
Definitely.
So you've been working in RPGs for a while, and that's pretty much your only gig, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I started in like 2012 or so is when I kind of first started doing social media for RPGs. And then for a while, my wife, she had a really good job. And like, so I was staying home with the kids and stuff like that. So it was just kind of like just a little bit of work was working. And then when we had the second kid, my wife didn't want to work anymore. And so then that's kind of when I went full steam. And it's been a struggle, but, you know, it's been great to have my wife home with the kids and to have the freedom to kind of, you know, we like to camp and do things outdoor a lot. And so to have the freedom to be like, all right, I'm going to work really hard for a week, get everything scheduled, and then we're going to be gone for a week. Or even like we went to Michigan for like a month. And, you know, and then we went to Colorado for 2 weeks right after that. So we were gone for like 6 weeks, which is something you can't really do at a kind of day job. And so, you know, and I can still work on the road. And so it's been good. And now things are looking up.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you got internet, you can do this pretty much anywhere, which is really cool. And it's also super rare for people to work in this industry full time. So kudos to you, man.
Thanks. Yeah. Things have been, you know, for a while I had like a bunch of contracts, and that is difficult in and of itself, having to pay attention to so many different communities and work on so many projects. It's fun and it's hectic, but it is tiring in its own way. And so I am glad now to kind of be working mostly, not quite full time, but mostly for Ulysses, because I can, even though they have a bunch of projects in itself, at least it's like, you know, it feels like it's all siloed a little bit better than it had been in the past.
Yeah, well, because I remember when you first reached out to us with Fantasy Grounds, and that is probably almost 6 years ago.
Yeah, that was like 2015, maybe 2014.
Yeah, exactly. And at that point, we barely even knew what virtual tabletops were.
Yeah.
But you know, and now everybody knows what they are, and they're trying to figure them out.
Yeah, it's crazy. Doug just put out their numbers for the last quarter, and like between February and March and April, whatever these last couple months, there's been like in pretty much every game system they have there's been like a 2 to 5 time increase in the number of games played from prior months.
Wow, I thought you were just like 2 to 5% across the
board,
but no, 200 to 500%. That's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I know Roll20 has been having some. I don't know if they still are, but I know initially they were having problems with keeping up, just because of like so much traffic.
Yeah, so you know, the Roll20 is like it's on the web, so that it depends on their servers a lot. Yeah, so if they weren't ready, that could cause some issues. One of the things with Fantasy Grounds is that the Fantasy Grounds Classic is on, you know, you basically run it from, it's a server from your own computer kind of. And so,
it's client based as opposed to being browser based or web based. Yeah. So Unity should be coming out soon too, right? I just saw, I'm pretty sure.
It's out in what they're calling open access. So it's kind of like a beta version. So there's still definitely, it's not optimized. So to me, I have a little bit older computer, so it runs a little bit slower. But there's a lot of really cool features on it that I'm excited to use when it comes out in full force.
Is that still going to be client-based, or is it going to be browser-based?
So I think I'm not sure exactly how it works. It's definitely not browser-based. It's still a client, I guess. So you download it, but there's still some cloud things like the lobby. So you can go up and connect to other people in a cloud base. But you can also still do it the old way where you have to like, you know, have them connect to you directly. So you can do both. So like if they ever went down, then you could still have people connect to you without their cloud-based lobby.
Okay. So I know that, you know, we've used Fantasy Grounds for a bunch of stuff, and it's like it was very hit and miss depending on your router, whether or not it was a pain in the balls or not.
Yeah, so that's why they implemented that cloud-based lobby so that you don't have to do any of that port forwarding anymore. Because a lot of people had trouble doing that. It's a little bit more advanced than most people are capable of with their web routers. Without some help. Yeah.
There was actually a problem with my computer that was blocking me from doing it, and I didn't realize it. And I wiped out the internet in the whole house somehow.
Oh, nice.
So like, I have to figure out how to do this. Like, I think I had inadvertently removed something from my computer at some point that I shouldn't have.
Probably.
And, and it was keeping me from doing stuff. So I just kept trying everything to try and get it to work.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to like go to a different computer to get it to work because it was my actual machine that was the problem. But in the process of trying to do the port forwarding on a machine, from a machine that wasn't never going to be able to do it, I ended up wiping out the internet on in the whole house. And I have a couple teenagers and a wife, so that really made everybody unhappy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Plus, I was supposed to like stream a game in a couple hours, so it's not good.
Yeah.
Well, it's cool that they're getting rid of that. I liked using it, but we mostly do theater of the mind because a lot of people are like, "How do we play online if we don't understand virtual tabletops?" I'm like, you don't need them.
You don't have to. Yeah, there's so many different ways to play, and the thing I love about Fantasy Grounds, though, is like when you get that high level. So when everybody kind of has played for a little while and they know their characters, not only do they know the characters, but they know how to use them on Fantasy Grounds because, it's kind of like its own little computer game. You've got to know which buttons to push and all that kind of stuff and what commands to do. Because when we talk in a game, in a face-to-face game or even just online without using software, when I say I target this guy, who I'm talking about, but on the computer, if you want it to do automation, you have to know how does your character target that brigand. And in Fantasy Grounds, you hold control and you click them, whether it's in the combat tracker or the map. And so there's a whole other layer of game on top of playing D&D that way. But once people have that figured out, and you're running those high level games, and the best thing I think is when you have a wizard and the wizard, casts a fireball and there's a whole bunch of mooks out there. And so the wizard can just can drag a square and just select everybody there, or they can individually hold control and select everybody and deselect their friends that are in the middle because they have that that feature that lets them not have their own allies in there. And then you click the button and it just automatically rolls the saves for everybody. And then you click another button and it automatically rolls damage and it applies half damage to everybody that made the saves. Like, it saves so much time doing that. And it makes it way more fun because you're not like sitting there like, oh my gosh, I got to roll 8d6. I got to do it against these 20 guys, roll individually for if they save. So, when you have that level of automation, it's amazing.
No, I 100% agree. That is the fun thing. Once everyone at the table understands that, and they're just and the cool things like you just drop the die on the token you want to attack and things like that, and and it just it just does everything for you. It just happens.
Yeah.
Once you kind of get past that part of it, it allows you to be more immersive. It's this weird curve where it's less immersive until you get to that point. Right. And then it's more because you're not worrying about the math that you would normally worry about at your table.
Yeah, and there's two other features that I love. One of them that I don't use enough, and the other one that I use all the time, and I love it. So one of them is there's in the chat window. So there's like a chat window where you can just type stuff in, but there's a little drop down for language, and you can choose a different language. And so if you're playing an elf and I'm playing an elf, we can talk to each other in Elven, and the people that don't know Elven won't be able to read what we're typing to each other, which is awesome.
They just see the script.
They just see the Elven script, yeah. Which is so cool. I think that's so cool. And then even though we can all role play like, oh, I'm playing like I don't know what they were talking about. It's just cool when you really don't. I just think that's a whole little level. And then I really love, there's a thing called the dice tower where you can turn the dice tower on. And if you do, then when players take a roll and they drop it in the dice tower, they're not able to see the result of it. it only shows it to the GM. So if you're trying to be stealthy, I say drop your stealth in the dice tower. You don't know if you're stealthy or not when you're sneaking by the goblins.
Yeah.
Or conversely, when you're trying to incite someone, you're like, is this person lying? You don't know. You put it in the tower, and you roll a 1, and I say, oh yeah, he's totally telling the truth, and you think that's the truth. So it again gets over that whole thing of like we don't. I know I rolled a 1, but now I have to role play that I don't. And that's kind of fun too. But I don't know. I like the dice tower.
Or when the DM calls for a check and someone rolls, everyone sees the roll and go, oh, I want to try too. Yeah, so everyone rolls until someone gets it.
Yep, it totally gets that out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely some great things about incorporating that into the game. I also know people that will use it in person, like they'll if they have the setup for it where they have the extra monitors and the TVs for the game board and stuff, totally just run it off of that in person as well for those reasons.
Yeah, I got like so it was like 2015. I think it was 2015, 2014. I got like a 40-inch TV that was like used, and there was, I think we were still playing, so it must have been 2013 or 2012, whatever. We were playing 4th edition, and there was old program called Master Plan, and that was basically the same thing. It was like a virtual tabletop, and I hadn't been into Fantasy Grounds at that point. But yeah, so I was doing that, and now with Fantasy Grounds, you can do that. There's also an extension that will like fit your TV, fit your fit your screen to the TV. So like basically you put a player version out on the TV, and so it makes it 1-inch grids, so it makes it perfect for miniatures.
Yeah. One of the guys we've worked with in the past would do that. He would run everything from a computer or a laptop, and then would have the gaming table where everything would show up on it. So, which is super sweet.
Yeah, and nowadays it's crazy. Like there's so many amazing like those the old Geek Chic kind of tables, but with like people are putting TVs in them, monitors and stuff like that. It's so cool.
We were in a golden age. I think also I think this whole pandemic thing is going to like shoot us through into another era as well. Just with like, I keep hearing from the different people I talk to, like how many more people are just playing online now that have never done it before. Yeah. And it's like, a whole new world is going to open up to them. And while yes, I don't think it'll ever 100% replace in-person gaming.
No.
Yeah. But you know what? When you need to find a game and people in your town can't game when you're available, but someone on the other side of the world can, or you just want to play with a bunch of friends that you're not physically close to, it's just it's a game changer.
Yeah, it's it gave a push that I feel like there were so many people that were like, oh, I'm kind of interested, but I don't they have the other option to play in person, so they just do that because it's easier. And so now they're sort of forced to, and so I think we're seeing a big surge of that, and I think it will keep a long tail for it. The only thing I'm a concerned about, and not just for online gaming, but just for RPGs in general, like if this virus thing ends up being worse than we're imagining right now, and it has a bigger hit on the economy. We're going to be, unfortunately, we're entertainment, so we're probably going to be one of the things that gets hit worse. Right now, people pledged to the Fading Suns Kickstarter. It's got a lot of nostalgia value to it, and we were happy at the number that we came up with. But if a couple months down the road, if things are actually worse than they are now, we might not have that ability, and then we're going to struggle real hard.
Yeah, I mean, we had a Kickstarter that's been done, and we're, starting to deliver on. And like now, I don't know if it's related to COVID or not, but I just had someone email me yesterday, going, "Hey, my brother-in-law passed away last Monday unexpectedly." Are people going to start seeing that kind of stuff come through as well? And not only that too, just hard times. Even for Kickstarters that are kind of starting to deliver now, or are done, but they haven't delivered. And when people are on hard times, are they gonna start clawing back,
Right.
on that, which could be devastating to these projects that have already funded.
Yeah.
So, and it's a huge pain in the ass too once you get the money from Kickstarter, and it's like, yes, we can refund you, sort of, but it's not like it's not like you think that we can just push a button, because it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. No. Yep. It's a little bit more complicated. Yeah.
But yeah. So when did that Kickstarter wrap up, or is it still going on?
Tuesday it wrapped up.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
But Kickstarters are still coming out, and they're still funding. But like you said, like, how long is it gonna continue? And like, basically the con season's been done since since March. And who knows when that's going to come back, and how much of it, how much of them are going to get postponed. I know, like, our own convention, we've postponed to 2021, just because I can't imagine us gearing up to a convention and trying to ask people to buy badges, and like, we don't know if it'll be safe for them to show up to a convention at that time.
Yeah.
One of the fears is, like, we're going to hire vendors and they're going to go out of business. So there's so many obstacles with just being a first year event. We're like, we really don't need to add this to it as well.
It's really
for us or attendees, So,
are you guys gonna try to do like the thing that a lot of cons are doing and kind of do the virtual con?
I don't know yet. Like, right now, we're still dealing with some things, so I want to get through those first. Like, even like the Kickstarter, right? We finished up everything on our end, on schedule or slightly ahead of schedule, but now the printers are shut down. Right, so it's like, okay, well, we can't. So now we're trying to figure out, well, is there another way to get the book out on time? Are there alternatives? So we're still like dealing with that kind of stuff, and then as we get closer, we'll figure it out. I know some people have been like, hey, if you need me to do like a virtual thing, would love to. So it's just definitely a strong possibility. I don't know if we'll go like full tilt with it, but yeah, we'll maybe try and do some things. So, yes. But on the plus side, now we have more time to build out the con.
Yeah.
Because it really was like an afterthought to the Kickstarter. We're like, hey, this is a thing we've wanted to do. I think it'd be as a high level tier or stretch goal. So now we're going to do the thing. We're just going to do it next year instead of this year.
Yeah, and I wasn't able to make it this year, but next year I might be able to.
Yeah, you know what too? Like, one of the good things is we're gonna get a little more space or distance between Gamehole Con and us, so people don't have to. So if it's tight for people, they don't have to choose. Like, because as it stands, we were going to be like 4 days before Gamehole Con. Now it'll be like 2 weeks. So I mean, it's still close, but it's at least a little breathing room for industry people, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so we're coming up on that time. We're doing these for 45 minutes to an hour. So any final thoughts before we head on out?
I appreciate you reaching out and getting me back on here. It's good to talk to you. If people want to find me, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter at Radu76. You can find me anywhere you find Ulysses Spila, Ulysses International. Come check out our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Ulysses International. On Twitter, we're Ulysses INT. And yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we decided to bring these back while everyone's kind of cooped up to hopefully help them pass at least an hour out of the day.
Right.
Yeah, so thanks for being on. I really do appreciate it. It was great to talk to you again. And until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.
Bye.